Hello, everyone. Welcome in. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope your weekend's been going good. SoCal Patriot. Oh man, people are flying in already. Awesome. Donna, welcome in. How are you guys doing tonight? How are you guys doing? Lynn, always a pleasure to have you in here. Give me 1 second. I'm going to be sharing this out as usual, right? I working on the load up screen. I am working on getting a load up screen. That way you guys aren't looking at my ugly mug while I'm trying to do this. Maybe I'll have to get the boogie bumper to hook me up with one of those intros, one of those beautiful intros. If you guys haven't seen the Boogie's intros, they are fantastic. They are beautiful and great time every time. So thank you guys for coming in. Ate some bad pesto. Ooh, sorry about that, Circus Midget. Hopefully you'll have better days than another day. But thank you guys for all joining in. I really do appreciate you guys. Almost got everything shared out, and then we will be right as rain to continue on. So we got a full lineup today. We got a lot to talk about. You know me. I'm somebody who likes to pat backs and slap wrists. And certainly the officers in the situation we're going to talk about, there was some serious police brutality. I mean, tasering a guy on bare testicles. That's I think it's a little difficult to say that was not police brutality, being tasered 11 times. So we will get into the Glendale situation and that whole ordeal. We're also going to be talking a little bit about the Ruth Bader Ginsburg conspiracy, because we have seen a lot of people saying she has to be dead by now. She is dead, and there's no if, ands, or but about it, and that needs to be, we need to nip that in the bud. So we will put that one to rest. I've got a pretty good article, got some history behind that, so we'll lay that one to rest. I think that's a good thing to put to rest, certainly, because we shouldn't be wishing ill on others, and we certainly shouldn't be making up conspiracies just in the pursuance of hoping that we can get a better Supreme Court judge in there. We're going to talk a little bit about the 13th Amendment. I want to talk about the entire prison system as a whole. I want to talk about the reformation there that is needed. And of course, the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts now has an all-girls scout or troop. And so that is certainly something as impactful as that is. It is certainly something that is needed to be handled and to be discussed. So thank you guys all for coming in tonight. I look forward to the discussion. I look forward to having you guys call in during the middle of this show. So thank you all for being here. If you guys have never been here before, I am a libertarian. My name is Jason Lyon. I go by, the handle is Mr. America, the Bearded Truth. Thank you guys all for being here. And, we talk about things from a liberty point of view, about the individual liberty and why that is so important and why there is so much value in that. And certainly the power struggle between the individuals versus the government, and why it is and why it's so important that we, the people, fight for our ability to be free. So thank you guys all. I need an intro. You are absolutely right with that. Happy to beard gaze. At least some people are getting some entertainment out of that. So I want to first get started off with let's go ahead and just put the Ginsburg ordeal to rest, because I think that's certainly something that's been on a lot of people's minds, and certainly I think that's going to provide the most value to people with what is exactly going on right now for current events. So Ruth Bader Ginsburg, if you guys don't recall, the day after Christmas, she had surgery on her left lung in order to get rid of a cancerous node. Now, since then, they said that the surgery was a success, that she has no signs of cancer from there, and that she will come to a full recovery. And since then, she's made one public appearance, and that appearance, there was no photographs allowed. And so a lot of people took that as it's a false flag, it's a lie. So she obviously wasn't there, and they're just hiding it up, and she's dead somewhere, and you have the Democrats, and you've got the Supreme Court justices, and everybody's in on this gig in order to hide the fact that she is not there doing her job, and she certainly... and she has not made it into serving physically on the bench since then. And so there's been a lot of people that believe that she is 100% dead, that there's no vitality to her. There's no chances of her ever coming back. And certainly we have to debunk this, because it's just not true. And certainly the question is has this ever happened before? Yes, it has. Situations similar to this. And I'm reading this from the Daily Signal. This was written on January 11th. What Justice Ginsburg's absence from the Supreme Court means and what it doesn't. While the justice's absence is not ideal, the court faced a much more dire situation when then Chief Justice William Rehnquist missed 44 oral arguments through 2004 and 2005 while he underwent thyroid cancer treatments. To put this in perspective, the courts usually see between 65 to 80 cases per term, per year, right? During his absence, he was able to review the briefs and the transcripts. This means that he doesn't actually have to be there. So with any court filing, with any court case, you have people that are making transcripts throughout the entire thing. This is why when you see somebody in court, they can't just merely shake their head yes or no. They have to be verbal. They have to be audible with all of the with everything that they want to provide. And if they want to provide documents, right, that gets put in there, and then that also goes into the briefs. So everything there in the courtroom has evidence and is able to be viewed. And certainly with Rehnquist, he went on to write the majority of opinion in 4 of those cases. So in 4 of the cases, he was the one, his opinion was the strongest one that got more of the justices behind his opinion than others. And so certainly this is something that has happened before. And so this is not a situation in which is different from history. Now, how this relates to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Recusal is expected, right? Recusal is expected of the justices, of anyone who is out. But if they are able to be briefed in, if they're able to get the transcripts, they don't have to. And Ginsburg has not been recused of these situations, and she will still participate. She's been participating. Chief Justice Roberts has been explaining that she will review the briefs and the transcripts of oral arguments before casting her votes. And so when it came to this court case that came up last week, maybe it was earlier this week. Yes, it was earlier this week. Technically last week. Whatever. You guys get the drift on that. When it came to this situation, it was the June Medical Services versus G. And we had 9 votes. There were 9 votes that were being cast. So with understanding that there was 9 votes being cast, that meant that Ginsburg had voted. Now, the idea that Ginsburg voted and she's dead and it was her staffers or somebody else, voting for her or providing an opinion for her, I think is you can run down that conspiracy train. But the idea that Chief Justice Roberts would be willing to stick his neck out and to allow clearly an atrocity against the tenor and against the integrity of the Supreme Court, it's just not there. It just really is not there. And so certainly we can expect, and I think that you would have to be wearing a tinfoil hat in order to believe that Ruth Bader Ginsburg herself is dead right now. Time may go on and she may pass. I hope that she doesn't. I don't wish ill upon anybody. I disagree with her pretty vehemently on the way that she views the Constitution, the way she views America, and the way that she has gone after the Constitution in some instances. And so, I don't wish ill upon her, but I hope that out of the respect for the country and out of the respect for the Supreme Court, that if she doesn't get better soon, if it looks as if she will never be able to return to the same capacity, that she will step down, that she will retire and not view this as a partisan thing and not worry about who's going to replace her, but instead worry about the integrity and the tenor of the Supreme Court. And certainly if you can't do your job, you shouldn't be there. So I hope that that's enough, and I'm certain that some of you guys are going to want to tweet at me after this. Feel free to have the lines of discussion there, but I think for anyone who has been following that situation and is not trying to find their bias in this would accept that as a case closed. I want to move from DC. I want to move to Glendale, Arizona. So what happened in Glendale? Well, back in 2017, there was... Let me scroll up to the top here real quick. I love this computer. It's just so slow. Back in 2017, there was a man with his 11-year-old, his 6-year-old, and his wife in a car, and they were all passengers. So he had a family friend that was driving. And the individual that was the suspect, that was also the victim of the police brutality in this instance, was named Wheatcroft. So this is from the Free Thought Project. This has been verified from multiple sources, but I do happen to have... I do like the Free Thought Project. They may be a little bit exaggerated. I wouldn't say exaggerated. They may take it to the limit of how forceful the words need to be. But they're pretty well-rounded with their articles. So they said, disturbing body cam video of Arizona cops tasering a man 11 times. 11 times, including on his testicles, as his horrified family screamed for them to stop. The police are now being sued for excessive force and torture. Yes, that is the police brutality. The nightmare tasering began when Glendale officers approached a vehicle for a turn signal violation in July of 2017. Johnny Wheatcroft was in the front passenger seat while his wife was in the back, and their 11 and 6-year-old sat in the back. A friend of the family was driving. So Matt Schneider and Mark Lindsay were the officers. They asked Wheatcroft for his ID, and he didn't want to comply. He didn't want to comply, and anyone who is a fan of the Constitution and a fan of that liberty that is protected by it might agree with his premise. He was being pulled over because the driver of the vehicle failed to use the turn signal. In accordance with the state law, absolutely 100%. Now, the officers said, you will provide us with your identification. Provide us with your identification. And he was like, I don't have it. I don't want to. He was opposed to that idea. And so because of that, an altercation, Lynn, great question. We'll get to that. We will get to... because of he didn't want to provide that. He was threatened to be tasered. The officer was holding on to his arm, strong-arming him for a good minute or so. Decided that when the individual in Wheatcroft had put something into his bag, accused, it didn't look like I couldn't really tell if he was putting something in there or what he was doing. Thank you, Gary King. I appreciate you, man. But when he was trying to put something in his bag, or if he wasn't putting anything to his bag, it was kind of a tricky situation to look at. I probably should have reviewed that a little more. The officer then became uncomfortable and started to try to remove him from the car. Now, while Wheatcroft was still in the car, the seatbelt was still latching him in there. He was still secured by the seatbelt. And if you guys know, when you're trying to get pulled out of a car and a seatbelt is holding you in, it's not exactly the most easy situations for somebody who has no control in the situation. So Wheatcroft was tased while being pulled out of the car for resisting when the resistance was being provided via a seatbelt, really. And so that was the first tasering. So halfway out of the vehicle, Mr. Wheatcroft gets tased one time, falls onto the ground, hits his head up against the back of the door. The kids are going hysterical. Everyone's going crazy. And the officers are now becoming a little bit more agitated and angry. And as it continued on, they tased him multiple times there. They finally drag him away, and his legs are caught up in the seatbelt. Just his legs. And his 11-year-old son reaches around, grabs the seatbelt, whips it off of Mr. Wheatcroft's legs, and the officers start yelling at the 11-year-old. And of course, 11-year-old's not going to be able to really know what to do, so he stops and he starts crying. Mr. Wheatcroft is then on the ground, and they're yelling at him, saying that he's resisting arrest and everything else. And the officer, I believe that this was Schneider, and I apologize if I get this wrong, but I believe it was Schneider. I believe Mark was sitting on top of Mr. Wheatcroft, and Schneider was the one yelling at the kid. He walks over, and his left foot looks as if it goes and kicks him in the balls, right? So he's laying down. His head is away from Mr. Schneider, and his legs are slightly apart, kicks him. And from there, right, uses his left hand. His right hand has a taser. His left hand pulls down Mr. Wheatcroft's shorts. And by the police report, by the claims in the court from the police officer's side, put the taser down in between his legs and tasered the man's balls. Tasered the man's testicles. That's fantastic, right? It's so beautiful to know that that's what they're going to do because a man didn't provide his identification. They continued on, and Mr. Schneider was then, they get Mr. Wheatcroft rolled over onto his side, and by the police report once again, in court, documented, then put the taser along his hip line on the inner side, and by the report says that this was on his penis. So they threatened to to shock, to taser a man's penis. They had already shocked or tased the man's testicles. It is truly grotesque to see something like this, and it's things like these as they come out. The good officers, of course, that are on the force that are not willing to go to this level, that are not willing to go above and beyond in order to aggress against individuals, they get vilified the same as what Mr. Schneider is deserving of. Mr. Schneider was on paid leave for 3 days and then returned to the force. The man needs heavy repercussions for what he had done. As for the Mr. Wheatcroft and his wife, because his wife was also arrested, they both were in jail for 30 days. For 30 days before they could post bond. I apologize. I think the wife did get out earlier. I believe she was out in like 3 days or something like that. She'd plead to a lesser charge in order to get off so that she could take care of the children. I bet he'll show his ID the next time. See, that's just wrong. That's just a horrible idea. And I've seen a lot of people say that, right? Hopefully next time he'll just show his ID. Could you imagine being in a world where it's just like, hey, I've done nothing wrong. Why do I have to comply with your quote-unquote authority? Why do I have to bow to what you say, or you're going to inflict pain upon me? Now, I could understand if that man was being a threat to others. I can understand if that man had committed a crime against others. But it's you look at this situation, and you cannot think that, this is in any way a justifiable act from any police officer, from any law enforcement officer, because I fail to see in any officer's handbook where it says, look, if you got a guy, pull down his shorts and tase him in the testicles, because can we at least admit that that's pretty grotesque? That is deserving of more than 3 days off with pay, right? You don't get a vacation for that. And so it's just, it's horrible. I know you're joking, Jesus. I know that you were joking, but nonetheless, it was. I've seen that from a lot of people. I on my personal Facebook page, on other people's pages. This has been a pretty routine thing from the crowd of people that don't want to have a critical eye of government or the ones protecting the government's interest, protecting and serving the government's interest, and it's horrible. Those cops were on HGH, just like the ones where I live. Those guys, I know a guy who sells them that. Wow. Yes, I agree with you, Prishi Mugida. Thank you. It needs to. It seriously. Yeah, no, I want 3 days off with pay. Yeah, could you imagine messing up at work and getting 3 days off with pay? It's just horrible. So the Glendale police said in a statement that Wheatcroft exhibited verbal non-compliance by refusing to identify himself. He was willing to identify himself, he just didn't want to provide his identification, and failed to obey the officer's instructions. So if the officer says to jump and Wheatcroft doesn't jump, he would be guilty of the same thing. There has to be an actual line, right? There has to be a line that is placed on these officers. The officers just can't provide an instruction and go, well, he failed to do my instructions, so therefore I can tase him. Therefore I can do whatever it is I want to, up to and including killing him in some instances, where we can't have that line. That line of whatever they decide because they've got a badge is not justifiable. It's not in the pursuance of individual liberty. It's not in the pursuance of anything that is logical or valid, right? Because even the officers themselves are humans, obviously, right? Obviously, there are bad, horrible, egregious, reprehensible, repugnant officers that are on the force right now and that were on the force before and that will be in the force in the future. So you don't give them ultimate authority over other individuals just because they're in the mere presence of them. I do want to read this. Horrifyingly, Schneider is the next scene putting Wheatcroft's shorts down and placing the taser on the handcuffed man's testicles. The lawsuit filed by the couple reports Schneider tased his testicles in perineum. And then he placed the taser on his penis and said, "You want it again? Shut your mouth. I'm done effing around with you." You don't put it... Another officer held a handgun to his head, and Wheatcroft was kicked in the groin. According to the suit, in the police's own admission, the officers used a drive-stun method in which the taser is pressed against a person before being fired. Glendale police also released the 30-second CCTV video of the incident taken from a distance. And no matter what angle you look at this, you can see who was right and who was wrong. In the overall grand scheme of things, the officers 100% the more guilty party. They were the ones that were creating the most disruption. They were creating the disorderly conduct. They were the ones tasering a man's testicles. There's no way around this. And so I hope that this is... If you guys have been on the side of the thin blue line, and I hope you guys will come back and continue to hear me out on these situations, because I used to be on the thin blue line side. I used to be one of those people that said, "Well, just give up your ID. Well, just listen to the officers. If you just listen to the officers, you'll be all right." I hope you'll come back and you'll see that this is not just an isolated incident. This is something that continues on. This is something that will be a situation that may affect you in the future. No, Kelsey, you're not allowed to block people. Gary the King is a wonderful individual, and I'm glad that he's here because sometimes people just got to show that they're able to put words up that really have no value behind them. But nonetheless, so I want to transition from that, and I want to move on to what the police officers do, and that is fill the prison system. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the prison system. I want to talk about how we can actually fix the prison system, because I think that this is certainly something that whether you're in support of the police officers, whether you're in the support of the state, wherever you are on the line of supporting the status quo as is now, I think that we can all agree that there is a fundamental issue when it comes to the prison system and how it functions and how it works. Certainly, right? Victimless crime should be removed. I know that this is something that a lot of people have some resistance on. This is where a good discussion point. So if we want to actually help make the system better, having it be overpopulated is not beneficial. Having it overpopulated puts more people at risk of the atrocities and the tragedies that happen within the system, and it also destroys the families on the outside. But victimless crimes. What do I mean by victimless crimes? Certainly drug use, right? Ending the war on drugs. people deciding to make bad choices is not the same as somebody hurting somebody else, the same as somebody stealing from somebody else, the same as somebody taking property, violating somebody's property, destroying somebody's property, whatever it is, right? It's not the same. And so I don't think that really you should be saying, look, this person decided to use drugs, and so therefore we put them in this in the prison system where they're not being rehabilitated, they're not being ready to come out from the system, and you put them in this endless cycle of that. So ending the war on drugs and ending victimless crimes would certainly be something that I would be a fan of. But the bigger topic that I wanted to talk about was actually fixing the system. So I want to read to you guys the 13th Amendment, because a lot of people, I know this has been a recent discussion, this has been something that a lot of people had Kanye West open their eyes to, and that was that the 13th Amendment actually allows for slavery. Yes, I said that right. The 13th Amendment allows for slavery. So I will read you guys the text of the 13th Amendment. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States. So if it said neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction, that would mean that they banned slavery. That would mean that the 13th Amendment actually abolished slavery in its absolute. But instead, if you have a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, you can be a slave. You can have involuntary servitude. And so it's that has enabled for inmates in the prison system to have to work for free. That's where we have labor come from this. And so understanding that premise, that the 13th Amendment allows for slavery, and that's some of the ways that our prison system makes money, is by having the inmates. The inmates make furniture. The inmates make license plates. They do a lot of odds and ends stuff in order to provide a product. That product gets sold, and then that product, obviously money is being returned to those systems for profit for the prison system itself. If we were to treat these like a business, here's how you can actually fix. Okay, so we get rid of the victimless crimes, we get rid of the war on drugs. The remaining population, you can actually offer them, hey, look, you want to make license plates? I'll give you 2 cents per license plate. You want to build chairs, right? You want to build furniture, whatever you want to do, right? Give them a low wage for this. Give them some kind of a wage for this. So that way, while they're in these systems, they're not only producing something, they have an incentive to produce more. There's an incentive for them to gain from this, because when they get out, right? It's not the entire world doesn't stop while you're in prison. Right? The world does not stop while you're in prison. So that means that while you're out, while you're locked up in the prison system, you are now getting further and further behind on bills. If you have debts that are to be collected, if you are running behind on bills, if you're for short time or long time, right? Your family is being devastated by this and everything else. It's a way to be able to provide for your family, to provide for the debts that you may have accrued in the crime that you committed, whatever it is, or just to be able to help you once you get out. Because it is common, it is quite common that when people get out of jail, that they go straight to be homeless, and then they commit another crime, because at least then they have a bed to lay in. At least then they have some form of consistency. Then they have food. Then they have this, that, and the other. And the prison system should not be more comfortable than life on the outside. So trying to provide them with some way of getting out would be a much better way. As for the idea that the prison system itself is effectively been a timeout. People go in, they do their slave work, they produce these things right now. There's not really a rehabilitation. There's not really something to try to mold these people back into good citizens, if you will. And so that's something that needs to be worked on. So with these people making money, right? With these people making money from the system that we were speaking about before, they could take that money and be able to actually pay for services. So if you want to get better and you want to be able to prove that you're going to get out, right? You work, you make some money, You say, all right, I've got this a little bit of money saved up, and so now I want to buy a service. I want to buy a therapist. I want to buy this, that, or the other. I want to have somebody that's going to come in and help me get out. So when I get out, I don't come back in. Right? This is a way that you would actually have people, when you have to put in time, when you have to put in blood, sweat, and tears into getting out, into becoming rehabilitated, you're providing them with the skills to never come back. Right? I think that would be a much better way. And certainly, right, maybe I haven't thought it all the way through. Maybe there's some holes in the system that you guys may think of. And you guys are more than welcome to share those with me. Tweet them at me. Have I heard of the Keynesian? Yes, it's horrible. Yes. Jails are a government business. They don't care about rehabilitation. Yeah, and that's why I've recently, I don't know how recently, it's been mulled over time whether I want it to be a government thing or whether I want it to be a private thing. Get rid of the 13th Amendment, the clause that it enables for slavery. Get rid of that, rewrite it, just strike that part out of it, and then move it to the private sector, and we can see some betterment there. So that would be, I think that would be a much better situation overall. But I wanted to at least get that out to you guys, let you guys think about that, mull it over, let me know what you guys think, send a tweet at me, send me a message on Facebook, throw a comment up there on YouTube, do whatever it is you got to do, just let me know how you feel about that. Because part of being a libertarian is not only holding contempt for the state, not only finding the immorality of the extortion that is committed by them and the mafia-like tactics, but also finding better solutions. So if you guys want to help me out, I of course want to help you guys out just the same. So while we're talking about atrocious things, while we're talking about government, this is the last one, and I'll get off my libertarian high horse, and we'll talk about two other situations. One of them is the great Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Great is obviously very ironic. And the Girl Scouts. The Girls Troops, Boy Scouts. There we go. But this one is about Vertus Wellborn Hardiman. How many people have heard of this individual? He was born in March 9th, 1922 and died June 1st of 2001. Now, this was a man who was a victim of a United States government human radiation experiment at the age of 5. Can you imagine being 5 years old and being a victim of the government human radiation experiment? And it left him with a painful skull deformity that forced him to cover his head for 80 years. Hardiman was born in Indiana, and he attended Laos Consolidated School, where he and 9 other children were severely irradiated during a medical experiment conducted at the local county hospital. To get parental consent, the experiment was misrepresented as a new therapy for the scalp fungus known as ringworm. The radiation of the skull led to immediate symptoms, but also to a severe progressive necrosis of the bone all throughout his life. The school children from Laos Station School were delivered by their school bus, including Vertus, who was only 5 years old at the time and not technically enrolled in school. His mother sent him with his older brother to receive what they had been told was the treatment for ringworm. All of the children treated for with radiation complained of the symptoms. They all experienced headaches, suffered from dizziness, and felt extreme burning of the scalp. This is actually is a normal feat or a normal symptom of radiation poisoning. Eventually, all the children lost their hair permanently. Another symptom. Jared Elliott was raised by a mother who sympathized with African Americans and took on a legal case to help the Hardimans. The parents of the children did meet with a local lawyer and filed a lawsuit against the hospital, focusing on how the parents had been misled and tricked. But the verdict found the hospital not liable. Many suffered long-term effects, but with Vertus Hardiman, the effects were the most pronounced. Grossly disfigured, Hardiman bore this injustice with remarkable dignity. In 1945, Vertus traveled to California in search of a broader opportunity. In 1946, he worked for the County of LA General Hospital, where he served with distinction. Vertus lived his last years in California. Hardiman died at the age of 85. One of the things that Vertus was known for was the fact that, despite the fact that at the young age of 5 years old, his entire life was devastated. Let's be honest with it. He was absolutely devastated. Was the fact that he didn't hold contempt for it. He didn't hold contempt for it. He accepted it for what it was. He continued on with his life, trying to hide away the tragedy of what was left of his skull. Now, he had a giant open gash in the top of his head where he constantly had to wound it with bandages. He always wore a hat to cover it away from people because I don't have a picture to display for you guys, but nonetheless, this was something that if you would look at it, it's kind of grotesque. It really is. But he always had high hopes, or high value. He always said, look, if I were to complain about this, if I was to let this destroy me, then, my prayers will never be answered. And so I wanted to share that with you guys because, first off, the government sucks. Second off, when it comes to, you guys are all free to block Gary if you guys would like to. That's fine. I live the no block life. I'll let the trolls come in. Hopefully they learn something over time. But it's that level of perseverance that he had that I really wanted to focus on. Imagine having to live a life that is so different than everyone else, right? This was an African American, so he was black, and it was certainly, from 1922 to 2007. So he wasn't in the best of times as a young boy. But to take all of that and to take it in stride and to still be a great man and to be known for having a positive outlook and to be a man of God and to be a principled person and to, just to exude optimism, not only in your own life, but to others, I think is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I think that's really a lesson that needs to be heard and learned from a lot of people. But we move on from him, and I get off of the libertarian high horse for a moment. A lot of people saw the video from Now This about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. If you guys haven't, she had a 5-minute video of the House Oversight and Reform Committee on Wednesday, in which she was trying to pontificate about the idea of how criminal somebody should be, but they would be actually illegal. She talks about people being able to have unlimited amount of money coming in from the PACs to where they can run an entire campaign for office being funded by these PACs, and you could also pay an unlimited amount of money to silence people who may have dark secrets about you, that maybe your skeletons are in the closet and somebody's trying to open that door. And so she went after that, right? And it exposed Now This again, because if you guys remember all the way back to the Covington Church boys, there was Now This had run the video of just young Sandman and the Native American, I apologize for forgetting his name, where they had the face-off, and Now This portrayed this as a egregiously racist and disgusting and just absolutely reprehensible situation. And later on, the full video comes out. And so I want to play with you guys. I want to play for you guys the continuation, what happened after the fact. And certainly IFS Chairman Brad Smith not only corrects Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but says, hey, if this is your focus on things, you might want to self-reflect. We'll reflect on those who do focus on this so much. Let me see if it loads up. It's only a minute long, so no worries, guys. It's not going to be too terribly long. All right, looks like it's about to go.
There are a couple things, for example, that would not be. She answers, is there anything that could apply here? There are certain things that could not apply here. For example, the whole point of the article that she held up that I wrote was that you cannot use your campaign funds to make those kinds of payments. That would be illegal personal use. Right. Campaign funds are not dark money. They are totally disclosed, so they are not dark money. It's worth noting, by the way, that earlier it was mentioned that dark money constituted about $1.7 billion. I believe that figure is incorrect by a factor of about 500%. Dark money constitutes about 2 to 4% of the total spending in U.S. elections and has always been involved in U.S. elections. So those are just a couple of points. And I did kind of chuckle at the question, is it possible, asked of us, that these influences this money is influencing the questioning here. To that, I'd say that's something you have to ask yourselves if you're being influenced and see what you think. If you are, you might question yourselves. If you're not, you might question this hearing.
So he does a beautiful job there of just hitting her with the facts and hitting her with the truth of what it was that she's trying to spin on there. And he hits home with it, right? The people that are most worried, right? Here's to use Malcolm X, if you will. Malcolm X, he said that the people that were most focused on trying to help out, right? The people that were trying to be the most friends of the movement that he was a part of, those people that were trying to be the most helpful, he said those are the sheep, or those are the wolf in sheep's clothing, right? He said it was the white liberals that were the problem. And certainly what we've seen from that is we've seen a lot of people that really get focused on this stuff, such as what Virginia Mayor now Northam is doing, is that am I MAGA? I'm not MAGA, but I'm not against MAGA. Right, I'm unbiased with that. Thank you, NCAA. When it comes, where was I? I forgot where I was. I apologize. I got sidetracked by the MAGA question. But when it comes to this whole entire thing, right? Where was I? So we watched the clip and how that was unfolding. I apologize, guys. Somebody hooked me up. Somebody hooked me up with what I was saying before I got sidetracked. Oh, that's what it was. Okay, so when it comes to Northam, right, the Virginia governor, he is now that he's been exposed as somebody that has not only done blackface but by omittance, basically. By omittance, admitted that he was the KKK person from the yearbook. Because he said, look, that was not me. He first said that was me in the yearbook, and then afterwards he was like, that's not me in the blackface in the yearbook, right? It's all good. So from there, right, you had him admit to being blackface in order to dress up as Michael Jackson. You had him basically by omittance admit to being wearing the KKK, and now that all of this has been exposed, now that all of this has come out, what Ralph Northam is doing is he's saying, I will not step down. I will not resign like what everyone is calling me to, but I will spend the rest of my tenure here as governor of Virginia in order to fight against the racial inequity, in order to fight against the racial inequalities. And certainly, right, that speaks to it. And so when you have people that are so hyper-focused, when you have people that are so worried about this stuff, you really have to wonder why it is that they focus so hard on this stuff. Now, certainly, right, certainly that doesn't mean that every time that you come out and you oppose a system, you oppose something, means that you're trying to take from that, or every time that you're supporting something that you have an inherent interest in this. But for the grand scheme of a lot of things, certainly that is true, right? I have a very, very deep interest, self-interest in the idea of liberty. I want to be as free as possible. Now, what that requires of me is to make you just as free. So when it comes to somebody making it as free as possible for themselves, it's hard to spin that as a bad motive. But when you have somebody that is so hyper focused on the corruption of what others are doing, it is almost as if they're pulling a guise over themselves. They're pulling the disguise over them in order to say, look, I'm not here to do the bad things. I'm just here to be against the bad things. It really, you have to look at the motive. And certainly when it comes to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she says, look, you shouldn't be able to take money from a market, from an organization, and then also write bills about those. Well, under those circumstances, why is she trying to write bills for the American people? Right? Why is she trying to control the American people? It's disgusting. Why is she trying to control any of these corporations that pay taxes? Why is she trying to just... The control is what her desire is. And she's trying to take control from others. She's trying to rip the control from other people so that she herself can have that control. And this is certainly something that we're speaking to the motives of something. So it is very easy for somebody to deny it. But nonetheless, I think that at the core of what it is to be a leftist, at the core of what it is to be a socialist, a democratic socialist, if you will, or a communist, whatever it is, right? It is the idea that you can't trust the people, but the people should trust you. And by doing that, by them trusting you, they're willing to give life, limb, and every bit of their paycheck to you. And if they don't do it voluntarily, you'll be there at the end of a gun, ensuring that it comes your way. It truly is something that needs to be handled and needs to be discussed. I actually agree with President Trump on the idea that America should never be a socialist nation. But I do, pardon me, I do disagree with a lot of the socialist ideals that have been advocated for on both sides of the aisle. It really is it's a huge issue. There's so much socialism. There's so much subsidies that are being thrown out there for different corporations, for different entities, for different people, for different populations, for different countries, for all these different things. And at the end of it all, at the very end of it all, the loser is the taxpayer. So I'm going to open up the phone lines, guys. If you guys got any last minute things you guys want to talk about, you guys can call in. The phone number is 802-671-5328. I often ask how congressmen can take millions and stay objective. That is a feat that is extremely difficult in order to overcome, right? If I'm being paid, right, and I'm sure, right, I am sure that if elected into office, the NRA is going to want to endorse me. They're going to give me an A+ because I am better than them at being pro-Second Amendment. They're going to want to give me money. And there's going to be people out there that think that the NRA is going to influence me in order to change this, to change my views. And I promise you, no matter how much money anyone ever gives me, I will never in the slightest bit even shift towards the idea of moving towards the NRA or moving towards gun control or anything else. Why isn't the new Periscope feature working? So actually I run this through OBS, and so the Periscope feature doesn't work on mine for sure. I don't know if it's not working on other people, but it was working on my personal phone when I try to utilize it there. AOC, society that permits billionaires is evil and also will take from billionaires to pay for everything. Yes. And yeah, no, I mean, Elizabeth Warren has said something of the same ilk, right? Being a billionaire is terrible, so we're going to have asset forfeiture. We're going to take everything away from them. It's about values. The thing about representatives will never represent us under the current circumstances. So NCAA, I agree with you for the most part. I think that a libertarian will represent you because a libertarian will say, I think that you can do it better than me. And they want you to have all the power and the authority in your life. Can't keep being your only caller. No, man. I mean, we've had a couple other callers. You're not the only one. But you guys are all free to call. Oh, I forgot. Let me hit this topic real quick. If you guys want to call in about this, you guys are free to call in. But the Boys Girl Scouts thing. So we covered the the Boy Scouts when the girls were finally being admitted. And it was something, if I do recall correctly, I don't think I was just thinking this in my head, but I think I had actually said that when this comes about, how long will it be until we have an all-girls Boy Scouts? Well, the time is here. The time is here. The girls finally have an all-girls Boy Scouts troop. And so what this means is that the Girl Scouts were not girls enough and the Boy Scouts were girly enough for all girls to come in. Now, since the time of this passing, since the time of allowing girls to come in, the Girl Scouts themselves have been outraged over this because they knew that what this meant was that not only was the Girl Scouts going to get less visibility, and they did, not only was the Girl Scouts going to have less turnout, and they did, but they also knew that that the current troops that they had, and I apologize if it's not troops, that those were going to dwindle and fall out and fail. So they were going to lose Girl Scouts because of this move. And they also wanted to critique and criticize the Boy Scouts because the Boy Scouts, if you guys don't remember, they were getting a lot of media blowback for sexual mishandling of children, right? Little boys being molested and touched by the adults, huge issue. For money mismanagement, for people stealing from the Boy Scouts and from, fraud, waste, and abuse. And the bad publicity, the bad PR, and everything else, that they said, look, because of the inclusiveness, because of the 21st century, you're having a bad organization that's only going to become bigger. And now we have an all-girls troop within the Boy Scouts. I understand the idea that we want to say that boys and girls are equal and there's no difference between the two of them, despite the fact that biology and science and everything else says that there's differences. But if you're going to pride yourself on being able to have to integrate and have girls and boys in the Boy Scouts, why would it be a point of contention? Why would it be a point of value, a point of honor to have an all-girls troop? It is just absolutely ridiculous that this is not only news in the 21st century, but it's being paraded around as a positive thing. Oh, look at the Boy Scouts. They've got an all-girls troops. They are just doing the same thing. It's the same. No, this is. Yeah. If we're looking just to have misandrists, if we're looking to grow up misandrists and say, look, whatever boys can do, girls are going to do it, and they're going to do it better, and they're going to be able to take over it. Boys, you still can't go into the Girl Scouts, but girls, come on in, take over, do what you want to do. When we tear away at the value of the differences between the men and the women in our societies, and certainly there are a litany of differences. When we tear away at those and try to conflate the two, what we lose is the uniqueness. There are positive attributes of men and there are positive attributes of women. And when they come together and they're cohesive and they work together as they have in the past, and sure, I'm using the racist, sexist past, but you have a better society in that way. When you have one side that is trying to prove to the other side that they're more capable in every capacity, when you have that, it is you've turned the world into a competition rather than a cohesive union. It just doesn't work, right? The world is not about a competition. The world is about achieving whatever it is that you want. If you want to just compete all day long, do it. But that's not for everyone else. And so certainly we shouldn't be competing on gender and trying to have that, because when you have that, then you're forcing losers, especially when you legislate a loser versus a winner. And it's a huge fundamental issue. I'm sure we'll get into more of the victim groups and that whole entire spiel within the next week. Because if you guys have forgotten, next Sunday during the day, we will be actually going live and streaming an interview at a drag queen library read. I've got the inside pass. I've got some of the drag queens that are willing to have an interview and have a discussion. I will be also interviewing some of the protesters at this event. It'll be a great time. But nonetheless, right, this is stuff that we need to see. This is stuff that needs to be discussed. Both sides of it. I'm going to be playing devil's advocate. I'm going to be playing on the side of and the devil's advocate for both sides, because I think that it's good to understand both sides rather than just take your side and accept your bias or accept your view. So we have so much more to address. Absolutely we do. But I want to thank you guys for coming in tonight. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the show. Hopefully you guys got some new insight. Remember, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is not dead. Let's just put that conspiracy theory down 6 feet under. She's still not dead right now. I may be wrong. Maybe since the time of this showing, maybe she's gone. But I don't wish ill upon her. That conspiracy is gone and out of the way. Glendale, Arizona, you had 2 officers with the police brutality, the clear police brutality. Go check that one out and everything else. So I appreciate you guys for coming in. Hope you guys had a great night, enjoyed your weekend. I look forward to talking to you guys again this Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern. I am Mr. Murica, the Bearded Truth, Jason Lyon. Thank you guys all. Have a great night, and I'll see you guys soon.